So, for the record, Rob Roper. Yeah, we're back. So, welcome back to the Subcommittee on Government Operations meeting of Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And we're still on Bill 2 S98. We want to welcome Rob Roper from Stowe in to testify.
Thank you. And for the record, Rob Roper from Stowe here as a concerned citizen. I got to admit my testimony is a little convoluted today because I saw the printing of 1.1 and adjusted. So going back to my original testimony.
Your original testimony.
My original testimony on the original bill. So I had a couple of specific concerns and then one request. And I guess my principal point that I'd like to make to the committee is as you're considering this bill and language to put in or take out, is to keep in mind that an illegally cast vote disenfranchises a legal voter every bit as much as if that legal voter had been physically or otherwise prevented from voting at all. So disenfranchisement happens both ways. The language that concerned me was the subsection 2852. I forget what page it's on because I took the page.
17. Oh no, 16. My apologies. Yeah, the 17. 2852.
Senator White. Intimidation of voters, civil cause of action. Any person who intimidates, threatens, or coerces, or attempts to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any other person in giving that person vote or ballot who intimidates, threatens, or coerces, or attempts to intimidate, threaten, or coerce a voter to deter. This tough language. Prevent the voter from shall be imprisoned not more than 2 years or fined not more than $2,000 per vote. Okay, I would encourage you not to go down this route of criminalization of participating in elections, but I understand that preventing somebody from voting is a crime. But it should be, if you're going to go down this route, there should be a flip side amendment to this, making it a similar crime with equal penalties to intimidate, threaten, coerce, or mislead, or attempts, etc., to coerce a non-eligible voter to register and illegally vote. Such as a non-citizen or a non-resident of the state or a district in which the vote is being cast. If that makes sense.
I knew. I was like, "What is the angle going to be?" Okay, I understand that. Okay.
And similarly, to 454 subsection interference with voting 16A, any person acting under the color of law. So I'm assuming this means an election official or. Contrary to official policy or procedure, fails to permit or refuse to permit a qualified voter to vote, or who willfully fails to refuse to tabulate, count, or report the vote of a qualified voter is subject to a civil penalty in the amount of not more than $1,000 for each affected voter. Now, again, if I'm considering running for JP or town clerk, that's going to really discourage me from wanting to participate. If I could be civilly sued and face a penalty. But again, similarly to my first question, my first point, should you decide to go down this road, there should be a flip side of them saying any person acting under the color of law who permits an unqualified person to vote or willfully or negligently tabulates, counts, or reports a ballot cast by an unqualified person is subject to civil penalty.
Well, I had lost you. Where
It's 19.
Bottom of page 19.
Page 19. Thank you again, Senator Watson. I did have one question, and it's not I'm not sure I understand it. So this is more of just a red flag than me voicing a real concern. Is 2841 Voter Education and Outreach Fund hereby created to state treasury the special non-reverting fund known as voter education, blah, 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 getting down this public or private source of directed to the fund. And I just wonder if the private opens the door to sort of a Zuckerbucks type scandal where you have, well, that was where Mark Zuckerberg gave a lot of private money to local public outreach efforts. But the criticism was from folks on the right side of the aisle that he was only doing it in areas that would lead to higher blue turnout in states like Pennsylvania.
Wait, so what did he? So he gave money to who?
I wish I could.
Like he gave money to a town to help them vote to have like better tabulators, kind of thing.
No, to get the vote out. It was education on getting the vote out, and it was supposed to be
Get out the
civil.
vote
It was a get out the
Oh,
vote
done
campaign,
by.
educating, so the language here is, is it you're educating voters on the process? Is that get out the voted, and you're going to have private. So as I said, I understand it. It's just a flag that you might consider. I don't have the answer for you. I don't pretend to understand exactly what it means. One thing that somebody raised to me was the assistance for certain voters, any age over 65. It says in the original language that one person should go out.
Again.
And I think you've talked about this.
We have.
So, okay, you're on it. Don't need to hear from me.
Page 9.
Yeah, so,
Back.
and this brings me to my final request, and that is to please consider a discussion about incorporating voter ID into this provision of the bill, because when we move from showing up to the polling place, showing your smiling face to a clerk or a JP who recognizes you and crosses your name off the list, to mailing 5 ballots up to everybody on the checklist, it was done, in my opinion, without putting any security provisions in that would prevent somebody from getting a hold of my ballot, or an unwanted ballot, or a ballot that's sent to the wrong place. Sign the name of the named person on the envelope and send it in. And as I said, a fraudulently cast ballot disenfranchises somebody every bit as much as if I knock you on the head and tie you up in the basement until the polls close and you can't get there. Of course, that's more crime.
Yeah.
But the effect is the same. And I would actually argue that a fraudulent vote that disenfranchises somebody is worse, because if I knock you over the head and tie you up, a crime is committed. Something's happened. Or if you can't get to the polls, something's happened. Or if you don't have a ride, whatever.
Or they say you're not on the checklist.
Or they say you can remedy it. But if somebody casts a fraudulent, you have no idea. You just put your I voted sticker and you go out and think that your vote counted. In case you missed the story on CNN, it was a couple of weeks ago. They did a report on Q polling going back to 2018. 83% of Americans support requiring voter ID for casting a vote, and that number has only grown since 2018. They went back 5 years. It was 78%. Now it's 83%. Gallup had a similar poll that said 84%. Rasmussen has one that's 87%. It's not one poll. This is something that most everybody supports. It's common sense. Vermont is one of only 14 states that doesn't have any voter ID provision in it at all. And I will point out to the polls, this bill, you're trying to protect minority rights, and I think that's extremely valuable. And respect for minority rights when it comes to voting is terrific. 80% of people who identify as people of color support voter ID. So if you're trying to respect their positions, then I would encourage you to start by respecting their position on voter ID. That is all I have for you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Committee? Okay.
Another one. Well, thank you very much for your
Thank you,
time. I
Brian.
appreciate the
Appreciate it.
invitation.
I did see the Secretary of State come in again briefly.
Grab her.
I was on the list.
Oh,
I can go really quickly. I mean,
Okay.
and then I can free up the seat for Rob.
Well, to the secretary.
I can watch you guys from the video, and the secretary can have the seat. Go ahead and point you guys.
Okay.
And she can sit next. I mean, I don't think I have too much to say, but I'd like to just speak and go. My 2-year-old with a lobbyist.
okay.
I'm trying, but I should get back to her.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob.
We're still live. So for the record, Senator Keisha Rumpensdale, the sponsor of this bill. I think what I wanted to articulate most of all is I'm not sitting before you as the Senate Majority Leader. I'm not sitting before you as a Democrat. Voting rights should be and has been in Vermont a nonpartisan issue. Up until this point, we have several Republican co-sponsors of the legislation. I talked to the minority leader about this piece of legislation and, helping to ensure that Vermonters see as this goes forward that it's a bipartisan effort. I think that would mean a lot to Vermonters as we hear thinly veiled national threats about intimidation at the polls. We have we have had those concerns before. And we have stood up for people and made sure our Secretary of State's office was empowered with every tool in their toolbox to ensure voter intimidation did not happen, to fight back ID requirements in the past. I first ran for the legislature as a senior at the University of Vermont. I now sit before you, as somebody who got married and changed my last name, and these voter ID laws are not designed to further enfranchise people to vote, frankly. And we have to be really, really clear about that. In fact, somebody could take somebody's ID, as opposed to the system we have in Vermont, where many of us know and feel comfortable with and trust and are on a first name basis with our town clerk or the person who's signing us in at the polls. And I don't think we want to lose that. That's the spirit of local government and local democracy. This bill is simply about protecting people's right to vote as they see it, as they see their ability to exercise it right now. And that is under threat. And I should hope that we continue to see this as a bipartisan issue. I know there's some question about this version and, a subsequent version. Obviously, this is what I helped to author. This is what I was the lead sponsor of. I've heard about some of the requested changes, and I think they even might speak to some of the previous gentleman's concerns about not over criminalizing these matters, because it can be used against people maybe too heavy-handedly. But at the same time, I just want to say I think this is a very solid start. I don't know exactly where the second draft may have become kind of the vehicle for conversation, but I just appreciate the chair and the committee taking time on this important matter, and I think this draft is pretty good. And you may not have time to look at that other draft that doesn't mean this.
Well, I say we,
Maybe.
the decision was made to stick with the original.
Okay, yeah. And
Just ask, the effective date, I was kind of curious. Normally it's July 1st of that year or on passage, but this is January 1st of 27. Was there a particular reason?
that's a good drafting question, because I wonder if someone felt like we would be interfering with district
That's
elections.
what I was wondering. I wonder
Yeah.
if it was intentionally set to be because it is an election year and you don't typically do elections bills in election year, that was a solution by putting it out past this election.
Okay.
Was it not, did I ask for that or?
Yeah.
I don't remember that being a clear policy choice that I made, but I think it was probably so that we weren't worried about.
That's the assumption I made.
Okay.
Senator Clarkson.
But we are worried by it.
Yes, yeah.
So I am very interested, and thank you when we got to this discussion. I am concerned about this election. I am concerned about the election from all the rhetoric up here in Washington. And my understanding was that the reason we're actually taking this up, and the chair has generously agreed to take it up, is that this is we don't generally do election bills in election years, but this election is different, and this election is more threatened than any other election we've had in many years. And I think that start date needs discussion.
Oh,
Well, okay. I guess.
Well, I think I think that's the whole reason we're doing this.
I would say there are parts of this bill that will take longer to implement, right? They are about enshrining future access to voting rights in law into perpetuity.
But we could have sections that are affect.
Things that people are specifically worried about around voter intimidation, et cetera. You may want to look at that. I mean, right now that's something the Secretary of State's office could say, do they feel like they have enough tools for November of 2026?
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate you.
All right, thank you. I'll get the secretary for you.
Well, she's been texted her several times.
I think We need to take a break and
Oh,
to the
okay.
next event. Okay.
Okay.
Well, let's see if she's right there.
This kid, she's here. She's flying her down.
Okay.
She hides somewhere.
I've sent her 3 texts.
Welcome in, Madam Secretary. We have
On again, on
10
again.
minutes before we have to move to the next event.
That is wonderful, Mr. Chair, because I can talk fast. Sarah Oakland Kansas, Vermont Secretary of State, very happy to be here talking with you about the Vermont Voting Rights Act. And I know that you all have been diving deep into this so far this afternoon. So I just want to give you some very high level observations of the bill. And then also a couple of recommendations of other folks you might want to hear from on future days of testimony. So, you know, this is an elections bill in an election year, which often brings people to say, well, wait a minute, I thought we didn't change election law in election years. And I think it's really important for people to understand why we don't change the rules and procedures of elections in an election year, because it really, to use a sports analogy, feels like changing the rules of the game in the middle of the game. And I don't know how the players would know how to adapt, how the referees would know how to adapt to a change in rules in the middle of the game, and how the fans would appreciate that. And so you can plug yourself in as fan or player or referee. I feel like I'm the referee. However, this bill, as introduced at a very high level, takes what we have already been operating under in terms of the Federal Voting Rights Act and brings that into state statute. And so we feel that this is very workable for us to be able to say this is a continuation of the way we've done these operations. This is not a change in procedure in the middle of an election year. And also, I just want to point out for a minute that we're living in really unprecedented times where expectations that we have counted on for many years from the federal government are being shifted and changed very rapidly. You've already heard a little bit of testimony from Legislative Counsel about provisions of the Voting Rights Act on the federal level that have been struck down, and others that are likely to be struck down. And I think it's really important for Vermonters and for Vermonters' access to elections that we bring the provisions of the Federal Voting Rights Act into state law so that we are holding ourselves accountable to making sure that our elections are free, fair, and accessible for generations to come. So all of our election laws in Vermont are governed by local ordinances, by state law, and by federal law. And you know, this includes the important civil rights provisions and protections of the Voting Rights Act. If those are weakened, we want to ensure that the existing structure that we have in Vermont continues to exist. And we think that because this bill, as introduced, takes those federal protections and puts them into Vermont statute, that it is the right time and the right moment to do that. This is also the litmus test on which, you know, we need to evaluate whether a bill can be passed in this year, if it is consistent with protections that are already afforded by the Federal Voting Rights Act and that have been in place. So our goal is always free, fair, and accessible elections. And our goal is for everyone who is eligible to vote to be able to cast a vote. And, you know, we're working really hard to remove systemic barriers to voting. We launched a task force last November to focus on barriers that are experienced by certain groups of Vermonters so that we can work on chipping away at those. And I think that this Voting Rights Act is really very much in the spirit of that. We want to make sure that people who have physical mobility issues or have other disabilities don't have systemic barriers in front of them.
We need to make sure that people who don't have a home or a roof over their head know how to register and vote. We need to make sure that people who are in our Safe at Home program and address confidentiality program are able to vote confidentially and in every election that they wish to vote in. And we also need to make sure that people who are currently incarcerated are not given significant barriers in front of their ability to vote. So those are the four groups of people that we're focusing on in our task force. And I think a Vermont VRA is very much in line with the work that we are already doing. We're doing a great job in Vermont. I want people to know that I think that our elections are free, fair, and accessible. We have over 70% of Vermonters have voted in the last two presidential elections, which is wonderful and higher than many states across the country. However, it still leaves 30%, almost 30% of Vermonters who don't participate in elections. And so we need to be very mindful that 70% may look good compared to other places, but that still means a third of our neighbors chose not to participate in any given election, and we need to keep working on that. So we recognize that many people come with ideas for improving our elections and may in fact be proposing ideas to you right now. I just want to
one proposed.
I just want to reiterate that, there is a significant difference between laws that preserve the status quo and take the federal law and bring it into state law, as opposed to proposals that change the way that we do elections, change the procedures, change the rules, because again, we are using that game analogy, and we should not be changing the rules of the game. But we are very welcome to come back and debate any and all ideas in the 2027 election, or 2027 legislative session. So in summary, our office supports enactment of the Vermont Voting Rights Act in 2026. We're happy to dive deeper into the specifics of this bill in the coming days. I know that your days before crossover are numbered. We understand that there may be two additional proposals to add to this bill, and I just want to flag them now because I'm not sure that I will get back to speak to you all in committee. But there's been a proposal floating about to allow candidates to use their campaign funds to enhance the security of their home or any other security that they might need. Our office supports that. We are seeing across the country elected officials being targeted for everything from gun violence and assault to doxing and swatting and other forms of online hazing. And I think it's reasonable for someone who is receiving that attention because of the fact that they are a public servant to be able to use their campaign finance funds to enhance their security. We'll also be supporting the notion of extending executive protection to statewide elected officials upon request. Currently, only the governor is afforded executive protection, and that means that if there is a threat to the Secretary of State or the Attorney General or the Treasurer, we would have to figure out how to pay for that either out of our personal finances or out of the budgets within our office. And again, we are not being targeted because we are individual citizens. We are being targeted if it happens because of the office that we hold, and we think that the Executive Protection Unit should extend coverage to those folks. We'd also like to, just in closing, and I see Senator Mikulski has a question. We would like to recommend that you also hear from the Attorney General's office on the Vermont Voting Rights Act. If we look at this as an analogy to the federal law, the Federal Department of Justice, of course, does have a role to play in enforcing the Federal Voting Rights Act, or at least it used to. And so we would suggest that you hear from the Vermont Attorney General. And then also, if you find yourself in need of someone who's an expert in the Federal Voting Rights Act, please reach out to me offline. I can recommend a couple names to you because I know that it is it is a level of acrobatics and gymnastics of our ledge council to ask them to both be experts in state law and in federal law on all things. And so I'm happy to help identify someone who can
Senator
understand.
Mikulski.
Thank you. I have just a couple of questions. One of them is going back quite a ways, when you were speaking of the task force around, voter access. I love that in presidential elections, we have 70% participation, but I wonder if that task force also looked at ways to build participation in municipal elections and off-cycle elections, as those tend to be quite low and are actually the things that most impact the day-to-day lives of our voters.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Municipal issues and school budget issues can be the most impactful to everyday Vermonters. We are focused on the elections that our office has control over. We have jurisdiction in state and federal elections. Municipal clerks run municipal elections, and municipal select boards appropriate the money necessary to support those elections. And so while we have plenty of ideas and suggestions of ways that we could do a better job of breaking down barriers to people being able to vote in municipal elections, that is a much more complicated conversation, because it's not as simple as saying, appropriate us this money and we will break down these barriers, because it really is, those are decisions and changes that need to be made in 247 different towns and cities.
And the other part of that, which was the offset, the non-presidential elections,
Mhm.
the ones that we're going to have in 2026.
Yes.
Did the task force look at ways to help build engagement in those?
Yes, absolutely. The 2026 midterms may not get as much excitement and traffic as the presidential election year does. But we also know that people tend to vote in elections when they have the knowledge and the information that they need to feel empowered to make that decision. And so we hope that with the provision of our voter guide, which will be mailed to every household in Vermont, that people will then have the information about the candidates or the issues that are on the ballot in front of them, and will feel more empowered.
Wonderful. And then my other question, so in a lot of instances, and this is a little bit of a tricky one because it's not dealing with candidates, but it is dealing with campaign funds. We currently allow people to use leftover campaign funds to do constituent outreach and things like that. Would you also support allowing electeds? Because I hear you, and as someone who's gotten death threats, like,
That's sadly.
I hear everything you're saying about candidate safety, and I think that's really important, but I also think we need to be having a larger conversation probably. So I think people, once they are elected statewide and all.
Yes, I would definitely support that conversation. I remember what it's like to feel walking out of a public forum as a state representative and walking out to my car and wondering, is this the day that my tires are going to be slashed? Or worse, is somebody who was angry at me and going to confront me on my way out to my car? So yes, I would certainly support having that conversation.
I really welcome that. And as we know, we have seen threats on statewide officials' lives, threaten the kidnapping of mayor, governor, with
Yeah.
but the two instances in which we have seen most recently lawmakers who were armed and murdered, they were state representatives.
Exactly.
Senator Clarkson.
So, Brian and I both have the same question, which is the effective date. If we're concerned about this election, which I think many of us are, given the rhetoric that's coming out of Washington, the effective date is actually next year. And would you have any objection to making key provisions of this bill effective July 26th, or effective upon passage?
Here's how I think of that. The way we operate elections right now in Vermont complies with all of the provisions of the Federal Voting Rights Act.
Right.
In the event that at some point in the next 3 to 30 months, some portions of those voting rights provisions are removed, that's not going to change anything that we do functionally in Vermont.
So we don't see any action before this election
Yes,
that would threaten. You don't see
correct.
any Supreme Court action that might be, or an executive order that might interfere with the elections this year.
I don't see any,
Because there,
I don't see any need to rush the effective date of this, because what we are doing right now is complying with federal law as it is right now. And
but federal law might change in an instant with an executive order.
right, but that simply means that if there was a violation, the federal government wouldn't enforce that violation. It doesn't mean that a violation like that would necessarily happen in Vermont. And I'm telling you that we are going to operate as if the provisions are all intact.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
You're very welcome.
Great to see
Thank you
today.
so
Nice to
much.
see you.
Yeah.
So fun to be in and out.
I did see Senator Hardy put her head in, but I want to get the committee a 5-minute break. Please limit it to 5 minutes so we can take up the next.